Hey guys, hope you are all going super well. Thanks for coming on this afternoon. Now, just going to wait a couple more minutes for a few more people to pop on as they come through before we get started too far, because we've got our attendee list. So I just want to make sure everyone's in before we get started. I've got myself here, Wayne Jessup, and we've got Jess here, Jess Fleming. She's my right hand with everything we do. And I'm just going to go through today talking about self-managed super funds, which is really, really interesting. I love this part. Now, guys, okay, I think everyone's here for now. Awesome. All right, so let's get started, guys. My name is Wayne Jessup, the property bloke. If you haven't been here before, welcome. As a question, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to share my screen, go through a bit of a PowerPoint. I've got a bit of a video interview with an accountant on self-managed super funds as well. So, and then I also have what we call a member breakdown. So existing member, what we've been able to do over the last few years for them as well. So guys, let's get started and we'll hook in. So bear with me 2 seconds. I'll share my screen. All right, so that's what we're doing today. I hope everybody can see that okay. All right. So before we get started, next month. So at the moment, we've got it scheduled for Saturday, the 8th of June, which is the King's birthday long weekend. We're 50-50 on that date, to be honest with you. But we may do it on a Tuesday night instead, but we'll see how we go. But each month, I'd like to do a bit of a workshop to explain what you can do in property. So before we get started, a bit of basic info, chat box and Q&A. So if you have a question, you've got the Q&A button down the bottom here. You can put your question in. And as I get certain breaks, I'll answer questions. I'd love questions. More questions, the better. And of course, we've got the chat. You've got the chat there too. You can ask questions in either or. We can see them both. But if you want to just, I suppose, as a bit of a test for you guys there in the chat, feel free to whack in where you're from. I've got clients and new people on here from all over Australia. So feel free to whack in the chat box where you're from, guys, and introduce yourself. And then, yeah, so I suppose, why is everybody watching? So this is quite common. It just depends on what stage of property you're at to. You might be just interested in potentially just creating some sort of wealth and freedom through real estate, and you just don't know how to get started on it. Obviously, passive income is important to replace your income and your job. But more commonly, you normally refer to me from an accountant, broker, planner, or even a friend or family member. They've suggested for you to watch this to expand your knowledge, etc., in real estate. All right, so through today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain a little bit about myself, because obviously there's some attendees here today that know me, been clients of mine for 10 plus years, but there's also, so I did notice some new people as well. So I'll quickly run through who I am. I'm going to go through some common questions and set up of an SMSF with Christopher Overton, who's from SMF Australia. He's a qualified accountant and practicing solicitor. And I'm going to dive into the loan structure of how you purchase a property in a self-managed super fund. And then at the end, I always like to break down a real member case study of basically with these guys. They've been clients of mine for 3 years. We've been able to help them recover from a poor financial position after a divorce. They had a fair bit of debt, and now they own their home outright at 1.25 million with no personal debt, whatever, and 2 new high yield investment properties, which is awesome as well. That's an awesome. This member breakdown is really, really good for me. Of course, we have the old disclaimer. So, guys, what I'm going to explain to you today, even with what Chris explains as an accountant, this is all general information. You don't use half this information and try and go ahead and do it yourself. You could come unstuck. Always get professional advice. The reason why I do these workshops is I just love sharing ideas and real strategies in the marketplace of what you can do. I just want to expand everyone's knowledge with property, and I want everyone to take control of their future, whether you use property, whether you use shares, whether you use Bitcoin. I honestly don't care. I just want you to do something apart from just working every single day. All right, so let's get started, guys. So the first thing I'm going to do today is I'm going to just explain to you who I am. So obviously I'm Wayne Jessup. I'm a property investor, buyer's agent. I'm the founder of the Property Bloke. I bought and sold a ton of properties for myself and also clients over the last 24 years. And I've been involved with over $300 million of property transactions. Most importantly, you need to know my accreditation. So what am I qualified for? So I'm a qualified property planner. I've got my diploma in financial planning, diploma in real estate, diploma in mortgage planning. I've got my real estate licenses in every state. As actually missing one there. I'm actually a real estate license in Western Australia as well. And of course, I'm a justice of the peace. If you ever need anything signed off, let me know on that one as well. I do talk about data partners a fair bit, and I like to do a quick chat about data partners. Now, a data partner is someone who feeds us information to help us assess areas. A prime example is down the bottom here, you've got Hotspotting by Terry Ryder. He's a guy I meet with every month. They help us pick hotspots or fringe pockets of hotspots where we're going to get good growth for our clients, good capital growth, and sometimes we're investing predominantly for cash flow as well. So we use a lot of different data companies, which helps us work out what style of property we need for a client and where to buy for our clients as well. So that's probably the most important part of what we do. In the whole transaction, we can set up a bit of a plan. We can do everything, but it really comes down to the property, how you're buying. You've got to buy right. And the member breakdown I speak to you later is a prime example of buying right and succeeding in property. All right, so I'm going to hook into here, guys. This is Chris here on the right. This is a pre-recorded video. I couldn't get him to jump on live today. Obviously, it's a Saturday afternoon. He may have family commitments, but I'm going to play you a video. I think it's about 10 to 15-minute video where we go through some questions and answers about a self-managed super fund setup. At the end of that, I'm going to go through how the loan's structured, answer any questions before we move on to the member breakdown. All right, so bear with me, guys. I'm just going to change over. I'm going to stop that sharing. Give me 2 seconds. And I'm going to share my video screen here, guys. All right, so I'm going to play this for you guys. And at the end, we'll have some question time for anyone there who has some questions. Overton here from SMS Australia, and what Chris is a specialist in self-managed super funds, and of course a lot of you listening today are watching because they want to buy a property with their super. So I just want to introduce you to Chris. Chris is going to give you a bit of a rundown of where he's from and what he does, but of course this is just general advice, guys. This does not suit everybody, so keep that in mind when listening in. Hey Chris, how you going today?
Great, thank you, Wayne.
That's great, mate. That's great. But, mate, I suppose it'd be good to start off with a bit about yourself and what you guys do, and then we can just go into a few questions we've got that we've grouped together from clients that they often ask, and just break that down a tiny bit for each person that's on this today.
Of course, more than happy to. Yep. So I founded SMSF Australia with a couple of other directors 6-7 years ago, and we just work in the self-managed super fund space. We do the legal and the accounting. So I'm a practicing lawyer as well as an accountant. We very much do that advisory part. We don't do any financial planning. So I have no idea what you should buy, what you shouldn't buy to go up in value. And my crystal ball's never been that good. So it's not an area I play in. Yeah, but we can help you with how you structure an SMSF, compliantly, what are you allowed to buy, and how do you structure a property, a bare trust, and all of those mechanisms. And so we very much sit in the market as a bit of a niche player in that sort of special.
We've just lost the sound there, Wayne. I'm not sure.
Joys of a self-managed super fund is that it does have one of the broadest mandates within superannuation in terms of what you can invest in. There's no other vehicle where you can own a direct property within super, which is why SMSFs are so popular.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm finding it becoming more and more popular every single week, to be honest. So yeah, that's awesome.
I think a lot of people have realised that having a bit of direct property exposure can be a good thing as part of an overall strategy. We certainly have lots of financial planners who refer clients to us where as they're getting bigger, the industry funds and other platforms are actually more expensive than an SMSF. So it is it's a tool that's helpful for a lot of people.
No, awesome, Chris. Too easy, mate. Well, mate, if it's okay with you, we'll get a few of these questions
Of
done.
course. I always love a bit of Q&A.
Yeah, I do like it too, to be honest, because everyone's different. So for you guys that are watching, any question that may have directly for you guys that we don't answer today, you can always shoot us a message. We can push it through to Chris as well. And Chris is going to give you his contact details, email, etc. at the end of this as well, just in case you have questions just specifically for yourself. But yeah, always, but that's more stopping from general advice, more to particular one person advice. So it's best to do that separately. But guys, let's get started with a few questions here. So Chris, the first question we've got here, mate, is how much does it cost to set up a super fund? Self-managed super fund, sorry.
Set up a self-managed super fund costs $2,000 plus GST, and that includes an ASIC fee to the Australian Securities Investment Commission of just under $600. It includes the legal costs of creating the deed, then the accounting time of getting the ATO registration set up, getting what's called an electronic service address, which basically means your boss can pay super into the fund. As well as your TFN, ABN, and then the rollovers. So moving money from your existing industry funds, like your Host Plus or Australian Super, into the SMSF.
Oh, awesome. That's fantastic. And I suppose as a question, a lot of people are daunted by the process of the setup itself. Like in your sort of, I suppose, history or experience, how long does this take to actually set up?
Honestly, it's much easier than most people think. So, we do hundreds of setups a year. The setup process itself only takes 3 or 4 days. So once we've got all the information, so we've got a form that you fill in with all of the details, what you're looking for, we step by step it out for you to help with that process. Then 3 or 4 days later, we've got everything done with ASIC and the legal team. Then it's just about waiting for the ATO to issue the Australian business number, the ABN, so that you can go and open a bank account. That can take up to 28 days. Usually it's instant. So maybe 95% of all the applications we lodge are instantly done. But those last 5%, it's usually if you're behind with the ATO. So if you've been late in the last few tax returns, that will have an effect. Or if you've got a bunch of debt with the ATO. So, if you owe the ATO 20 grand, they're probably not going to give you an ABN. They're going to come back and go, well, why do you think you should be a trustee of a fund? So,
there's certain responsibilities as a self-managed super fund manager, isn't there? So, yeah, definitely. That's good now, because a lot of people get stuck on that and they think it's going to be a really hard process to set it up, have it all going, but it's not that difficult because everyone else does all the work for you for a certain degree. So,
very much so. And it's a very regimented process. I mean, all super funds are set up with very similar mandates in a very similar fashion. It's all governed by what's called the SIS Act. It is a very regimented process, which is why it's actually quite easy to do.
Yeah, I think so too, because you can't really do it wrong. That's the main thing. No.
Well, if you do, it's really easy to tell because the funds aren't going to roll in, or
someone picks up on it pretty quickly. Yeah, exactly. So I've got another question here. Can I open bank accounts at their normal bank?
You can open bank accounts at your normal bank at any bank. So there's no mandated bank that you need to use. Most banks have self-managed super fund options. So if you look at SMSF bank account, all the majors do. The only thing I would say is a lot of people actually choose not to use their normal bank. The reason is just to make sure they don't accidentally make a payment out of their SMSF account for something wrong. So, you're logging in, you're paying a bill,
you're tired.
And it does happen. And of course, that's a breach of the SMSF, and it just means a huge amount of paperwork and admin to fix. And you might have paid a $100 bill from the wrong account, and suddenly you've got $1,000 worth of admin to try and fix it. Sometimes having a separate bank account for the SMSF means that those mistakes don't happen. So just something to always think about.
It's an easy, because as you know, the internet banking is just a drop-down box. It's so easy to pick the wrong account. We've all done it. You've done it from your savings or your check account. Everyone's done the wrong transfer from the wrong account, surely, in their past. Well, no, I have a few times. But no, I 100% get that. And I actually find the bank account of clients is probably, for me, that's probably the hardest part to do, because that's where they've physically got to go into the bank with all the information and go to the bank teller and go, listen, I've got to open a super fund account. The bank managers or bank tellers go, oh my God, look at all that paperwork, come back another day. But it's that part I find to be I wouldn't say the most difficult, but the most time consuming for the individual to open that up. But once that's open, it's pretty easy after that. So, yeah.
Sometimes it's, depending how digitally savvy the client is, sometimes using Macquarie is quite useful because there's no in-branch activity, which means it's all done via email. So depending on whether or not you're happy with a digital only offering, of course. But that does suit quite a lot of clients, purely because everything is done online. Macquarie Valley has branches.
That's also good to know, because most people are relatively digital savvy as such, and they would rather do that than actually make a time at the bank and try and have time off, whatever it might be. It's quite.
I would. I don't have to drive down that way.
Oh, 100%. Especially if there's more than one member involved, getting everybody there is hard. Is quite hard to do. So
painful as.
And I suppose I've got another question here, mate. Do I need to see a lawyer to get legal advice?
Look, generally not. Look, there's a few instances where that can be recommended. So, for example, once you start a self-managed super fund, if you have a complex will and estate structure, then you might want a lawyer to have a look at, well, do I do a binding death nomination? Don't I? Should I change my will based on this? For 99% of clients, it's probably not an issue, but it is something to look at for those that do have more detailed estate planning needs. So, blended families, complex assets, complex estates. The majority of the rest of the time, no, the legal requirements are relatively straightforward.
Yeah, and I know that from a lending perspective, occasionally the banks want legal advice, but that's not hard to get nowadays. But I am noticing a lot of banks moving away from that again too. So, that's a good one there. This is actually a good one. This is a very common question I get is, do I have to transfer all of my super to the SMSF? Close the existing fund down?
No, you don't. In fact, a lot of clients choose not to. And the reason being is that when you've got some funds in an industry fund, you have access to their insurance product, which is basically a pooled insurance policy.
Yes.
So what that means is that they don't change it based on whether or not you're a smoker, whether or not you're obese, whether or not you've had an injury or a heart attack in your life or whatever else. Closing it down and moving it all over means you lose that insurance product. And if you've had one of those events in your life, you may not get another one. So a lot of people will leave a set amount of money, and I can't tell you how much. So you'd have to contact your fund and find out how much.
Everyone's different.
The insurance there. But then we roll, let's say it was $1 million fund, we roll 950,000 to the SMSF to invest, but we leave 50 grand in there to keep the insurance active. So that's a very common thing for clients to do.
Yeah, and from an employer's contribution too, the clients don't have to necessarily have that go into the SMS either, do they? They can leave it in their industry fund or whatever fund they've got set up too, don't they?
Entirely up to them. It's just about what suits them best. Some people also have it split, so partially goes into one versus another. It's just about what's right for the client.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's perfect. Yeah, awesome. And this is a good one because you get occasionally you get partners, husband, wife, wife. But also get brother or sister that also want to do it. So as a question, how many people, how many members can there be of a super fund?
So you can have up to 6. It used to be up to 4, but it changed in July 2021. They opened it up to 6 people. And it's basically treated like a unit trust. So everybody has the exact shares that they come in with. So, if one person has 100 grand, one person has 50, then it's split proportionately, or the income is split proportionately. So it doesn't have to be, it's on a very commercial basis.
Because a lot of people think if they go into it with their sister that all the funds just becomes one, but that's not true, is it? At the end of each financial year, you get like a member statement, don't you, where the money you put in, your shares you own, etc., of the super fund or etc.
That's done by the accountant, and it's also audited, and the auditor signs it off on those balances each year. And even if you wanted to, you couldn't move money from one member account to another. It's an automatic breach of the legislation. So it kind of has to always be in those proportions, except in the events of death, divorce, one of the big things.
That's tough. But it's also good if one decides, I don't know, there's been a life change, they want to exit the fund, they've got their amount that they put in, so they've got their amount that they can exit with. They don't lose money as such on that perspective.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Next one is, now this is a good one. People think this is what happens, but do I get the loan in my own name?
No. So a self-managed super fund will usually get a loan via an instrument known as a bear trust. So a bear trust is more or less government red tape, but super funds themselves cannot borrow money directly, but they can do by utilising what's known as a bear trust. That bear trust then holds the property, receives the mortgage, but then all the rent, all the expenses, all the mortgage payments still go through the SMSF itself. That bear trust doesn't have a tax return. It doesn't do anything except sit there to hold that property and that mortgage. So it is very much red tape, but it's the way that we have to go through to get a mortgage within a super fund environment.
Well, that's what the government put together, didn't they, really, at the end of the day, to make it usable structure, you could say.
It was designed to try and protect the rest of the fund, with the idea that if the bank ever foreclosed, they could only take the property and they couldn't touch the other assets of the fund.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's been successful, we'll leave for beers another time. But that's certainly the rationale behind the structuring that they've done.
Yeah, and also, Chris, I believe that always comes down to just picking the right asset. If you pick the wrong asset, it can go pear-shaped, like everything.
Of course.
It's important to have the right advice when you're picking the asset for the super fund itself. So, yeah, no, that's awesome. This is a good one here. So this is a common question, actually. Again, can I build a property?
Yes and no. So
Yeah, that's what I say too. Yeah.
oh, look, it's look, most people can't. The reason being is that if you've got a loan against the property, you can't build on it. So basically, you have to be able to do it in full cash. So pay $1 million for a block of land, pay $1 million for a build. You've got to have all of that within the funding cash, and you can't have any borrowings at all. Otherwise, you have to be able to show a single acquirable asset. So you could still do an off the plan, for example. A single acquirable asset because you're not doing the build, but you can't buy a block of land and then build on it. So unless you can do it in full cash, which majority of clients can't do, at least at the beginning. So
it's very rare, yeah, to have that.
Very rare.
But it's basically, I know what you're saying. The property's got to be habitable, rentable. Occupation certificate's a big one. If they are buying a brand new property, they can't buy brand new, but it's got to be as a like product, not progress payments through a builder. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a quick question we have on a regular basis, actually, because a lot of people do want the newer properties, so it's more step to forget. But I'd explain to them you've got to buy it as a complete product, 100%. Parents often ask this question, I suppose, but it's, can I rent it to my sister or children?
No, you can't rent it to anyone who's considered an associate of yours. So
that's friends as well, isn't it? Close friends.
It depends. There's an associate definition within the Act that you need to work through. So that one will be more specific advice if you give me a detailed example.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
But generally, it's supposed to be at arm's length, which means that you have to show that it's normally it's via a property manager, although it doesn't have to. You can do it yourself. It's just harder to show that it's arm's length if you do it yourself. And generally, you don't want it to be anyone who could be considered a related party, because the penalties are quite large, and even potentially being forced to shut down the fund, which means that you're then forced to pass out the property, which is never what we want. So any property you buy at an SMSF, if it's residential, you don't want to have any connected party. If it's commercial, there is an exception. So if we've got a property that counts as what's known as business real property, then you could rent it to a related company. So my company could rent an office under certain conditions, but certainly with residential stuff, that's just not an option.
Not going to happen yet, and that's the best way to say it too. And I suppose it does cover up on the next question, really, to a certain degree, is can I live in the property? No, because you can't make personal gain out of your super fund prior to retirement, can you? So yeah. No,
the whole idea is that you're a trustee for your future self, which means that you, as a current person, can't get any benefit because you're holding it on trust. So it's the same for holiday homes. I mean, that's the one we see most regularly that people make the mistake with, is they buy something and maybe they Airbnb it or whatever, which is fine. But then they stay in it themselves and, but I was just doing the gardening. So I stayed there for a week between Christmas and New Year, and the auditor doesn't generally.
At peak time, they're staying there.
And it's kind of obvious, it's very easy to spot those sort of things. And auditors are very in tune with it. Obviously, it's what they do for a living. So again, it's just about keeping it all totally separate and arm's length.
No, that's fine. And I suppose I've just got one more question that's on my mind, I suppose, mate, is obviously you go into a self-managed super fund, you buy a property, 5 years later, it's not for you anymore. You can sell that property off and unravel the super fund back to your industry fund and shut everything back down.
Well, you've got probably two choices. So let's say that the property is not right for you anymore, or you've made your money out of it, you're happy. Once you sell the property, you've got the cash back into the SMSF. You could either go and invest in something else. So your financial planner might help you pick out shares or whatever else. Or if you want just no part of the SMSF anymore, then we roll it from the SMSF back into an industry fund. and close down the SMSF. And it's called a wind up. Again, very simple, straightforward process.
Yeah, that's what I try and say to people. If they choose it's not for them in a few years down the track, it's not that hard to shut down. It's just a bit of a process, isn't it, really? So,
like everything, this is just a regimented process. It's not particularly difficult, but also, I mean, it's you know, it's not something we give advice on. So we don't give any advice on whether an SMSF is right for a person. So that's outside. That's what financial planners do.
yeah,
So we don't give any advice to clients as to whether they should or shouldn't start one or shouldn't shut them down. We just help with the actual process of doing so once they've made that decision. Any of us are happy to help.
So I'm a big believer in the SMF structure. I'm a huge advocate towards having control of your cash. Whether it's, I don't care if people are investing in Bitcoin, shares, alpacas. I don't give a shit. I just want people to say, okay, this is my lifestyle, my future. We need to control it. Like, don't just go to work, come home, and do nothing about it.
I really agree with you. I mean, so many people are so passive with that side of things, and you think, geez, you know, I mean, we're going to live to what, 85, 90, according to the experts.
Yeah.
That means that if you're trying to retire at 60 off of super or 65 off of super, you've got a quarter of a century that it needs to survive for, which means that you really kind of have to be aware of it while you're working. You're only working from 25 to 65. So in those 40 years, you have to be able to fund really a 90-year life cycle between looking after your kids for the first 20 years and then looking after yourself at the end.
Yeah.
Which means that you've kind of got to have some understanding of how that's going to work. And I think everyone knows the age pension is basically baked beans at this point. So, you know, it's just such a hugely important part of people's lives. And unfortunately, one which I think a lot of people don't think about until they're 50, 55. And by then, there's a limited amount you can do.
Yeah,
right?
I wouldn't say it's ever too late, but you can do so much better if you get started earlier. And where I see people make errors is where they go from increase of pay, for example. They might get a job change and their pay may increase 10%, and they just bring it into their lifestyle rather than giving 5% to their future and 5% themselves. So that's the biggest error I see. I'd probably say 90% of people make regularly. So yeah.
I think that's probably pretty spot on. Lifestyle creep.
Yeah, it's actually it's a difficult thing, and I see it happen all the time. And the biggest thing I see is when the job change, you know, it's potentially not a long-term job change. Then they're going to go back, and they can't go back. It's too hard. They get themselves into financial strain that's not needed. So yeah.
Oh, and it's generally it's the things which don't bring long-term happiness.
No.
You know,
it's for a car or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Porsche Boxster with a $120,000 loan against it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
You know, and the car makes you happy for a month, and 120 grand should make you happy for longer than a month.
Yeah, it's when you go do your first service, that's when your happiness starts to drop off. Yeah, no, awesome. All right. No, awesome, Chris. Now, mate, that's all the questions I've got for now. And obviously, this is recorded, so we may get a few questions down the track. I can flick them through to you as well. But look, I was going to say, just a bit of a plug for yourself if you want to share your information, and then people can contact you direct as well, or one of your staff to put it all, in place.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, best first step is to check out our website, xmsfaustralia.com.au. It has tons of information about the process of setting up a self-managed super fund, has a lot of information about properties and how you buy them compliantly within the SMSF environment, bear trusts, etc. So I'm sure Wayne will pass on my details on my business card as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's certainly got a lot of good information if somebody wants to do some research and just really understand that process in more detail.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks heaps for your time, Chris. I really appreciate that. It's good to get information on just directly from yourself rather than from me direct. It's good to have that. And there's always a lot more questions, so if we do get more, we'll pass them on.
I'm always happy to do another one of these in the future and answer the next set of questions.
Too easy. Thanks heaps for that, Chris. Thanks so much.
Cheers. Thanks.
Okay, I think I'm back. All right, can everyone hear me okay now? Sorry, guys, I have to change. Jess, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. All good.
Perfect. All right. So, guys, what I'm going to do now is obviously we had the chat with Chris. We've got a couple of questions in there now, but I'm going to come back to those questions. I'm going to just go to my whiteboard And what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain on the whiteboard side of things on how it's actually structured from I suppose from a structure perspective. I like to just break it down with my whiteboard. So I'm just going to change my video, guys. Give me 2 seconds. All righty, guys. So what we just went through there is common questions and answers of how it all works. But realistically, that's all fine. But let's draw it out for you so you can see how it works properly. So I'm going to do a very basic structure. So what we got here is you may have mum and dad. And dad. Mum might have 150K over here with, say, Rest Super. Dad might have 100K over here with Australian Super, as an example. And they want to buy a property with a self-managed super fund. Now, like Chris mentioned before, you don't have to shut these down. And you can have up to 6 people. So you might have mum, dad, Frankie, and the dog. Do you know what I mean? Whoever's got super who wants to be a part of it can go as a member up to 6 people. So what we do here is I'm just going to use 2 people for now just to be basic. But you've got mum and dad. And just remember, with these super funds here, very often they have insurance. And you do not want to play with your life insurance, income protection, or TPD insurance either. So got mum and dad, and they want to go out and buy an investment property because they just want to diversify what they're doing. So there's a couple of different ways we've got to do it, but this is the main way we put it together. So the first thing we do, like Chris mentioned, you set up a self-managed super fund. Realistically, this self-managed super fund is just a bank account once it's all set up. It is a company with its own tax return, tax file number, and like he mentioned, setting it up with a different bank is sometimes safer, but you basically have a bank account and everything, all the income, etc., runs through that bank account. Now, depending on the property you buy, will depend on how much you want to roll over from these funds into your self-managed super fund. Now, the best way to explain it is, if you remember, Chris said to buy a property and borrow money, you need to set up a thing called a bear trust. Now, a bear trust sits over here, and that is what holds the property asset, okay? So the super fund itself, unless you've got cash, if you've got cash, if you're lucky enough to have, 600K in cash in your super, you can go out and just buy this property outright. You don't need the bear trust. You just pay cash for the property under the super fund name. But what I wanted to talk about here is the loan structure, is if you're going to go out there and borrow the money. So self-managed super fund, you set your bear trust up and you go out and buy a property. Now, say, for example, you go out and buy a $600,000 property. The minimum sort of deposit you need to have for that, like you can have 20% deposits. I'm not a huge fan. I prefer you to have a 30% deposit. So I'm going to run with 30 for today. So 30% deposit on that is basically $180,000. So what that means is mum and dad here, this is just round numbers, sorry guys, because obviously there's stamp duty and everything as well. Mum and dad here have to roll over $180,000. Whoever rolls it over, it doesn't really matter. Obviously, it's all split separately within the super fund. But say, for example, we roll over 180 and we go out there and borrow $420,000. That's the loan, right? So what we want realistically is we want to make sure the rent is covering these repayments because it's a super fund. We don't want to have a huge loss with a super fund style property because there's no personal tax advantages whatsoever if you run your super fund property at a loss. Benefits with super fund property, though, is if you're buying and selling property in your super fund, capital gains tax at the moment is only 10%, which is awesome. So you can do quite well with buying and selling property in the super fund itself. But for today, we're looking at buying and just holding the property. So how this works, though, is obviously you've got to make repayments on here, and it's got to all work from a calculated expense. So basically what happens is the tenant pays the rent to the super fund. All right. So your rent goes into your super fund bank account, and then the bank then out of your bank account, the repayment pays for the bank. Okay. So everything goes through your bank account to pay for your loan. That's pretty much how it's set up. But all you'll really see is, like from your perspective, is you'll see the loan, obviously, with whichever bank you choose to go with, and you'll have the bank account, which with whatever bank you choose to go with. And obviously what Chris mentioned there as an example is Macquarie Bank's easy to set it up online. I actually didn't know that before I spoke with Chris, because that was one of the pinnacle parts of where it was frustrating for clients. But now I know that it's been a lot smoother. I learned something, of course, which is perfect. But that's how the super fund works. So as you can see, there's no impact to you, to your personal finances, because this, the way I explain this is I say, think of this as a third person. You've got mum and dad and a third person here, which is your super fund. Everything's separate. You can't touch the money. As long as it's all working, you just set and forget the whole structure of it, guys. All right. So that's how it works. Super fund, Bear Trust borrows the loan. Sorry, the Bear Trust buys the property on behalf of the super fund, borrows the money, and everything runs through the super fund bank account. The most important thing is buying the right asset. You've got to buy the right property so it works really well for you. All right, guys. But that's how the self-managed super fund works. Whether you've got more or less will depend whether you can or can't do it. You need to have a certain amount to make it work, to make it profitable, to make it worthwhile. But of course, you don't shut down your industry funds unless your financial planner or whatever may recommend for you to do that. All right, guys. But let's get some questions. I think it's come back. All righty, guys. So for you guys out there, does anyone have any questions?
We do have a few questions today, actually.
We do?
Which is
Perfect.
awesome.
I love questions.
We love questions here.
Yes,
so,
yes.
So I guess this is, after you've already got one self-managed super fund property, but they're saying what this person's wanting to know is, can you use the equity in your SMSF property to buy another property?
Yeah, unfortunately you can't. So a lot of people in their personal names you've got your home, you've got a equity in your home, and you can use that equity to go buy an investment property. Now, with your super fund, you can't do that. You can't do what they call cross-collateralization. So if you buy a property, and this is why I say to people, if you buy an investment property and you want to pay heaps off it or put in a huge deposit, unfortunately, the only way you're going to be able to access that equity or that additional money you've paid, because there's also no redraw facility at all with a super fund, is you have to sell the asset. So it's very important when you go into it a little bit conservative. You don't make big decisions straight away. You may want to hold the asset for 12 months. But to answer your question, the best way to gain that, to take full advantage of that equity, is to sell the asset. So say, for example, we recently had a few clients where they bought property over 10 years ago in their super fund, and they might have paid, say, 400. They're now worth like $1 million. If I think it was like 950, but they had only like a 200 grand loan. So for them to realize that equity, they actually sold the asset and then split that across 2 more properties. Because remember, capital gains tax in a super fund at the present time anyway is only 10%. So it's not too bad. But that's how you get the equity out of the property. You really have to sell the asset to do that. That's why I say to people who want to put in bigger deposits or pay huge repayments early on, I say, listen, maybe not do that straight away. Just wait 12 months, just in case, because you can't get the money back. But yeah.
No, that makes sense.
I hope that makes sense to everybody. Sorry, I do answer questions very long. Yeah.
It's good you get the full explanation.
Yeah.
So another one is, can I invest in shares with my SMSF?
Oh, 100%. You can, obviously we're property people, positive property people. So, but if you've got, say you're lucky enough to have $400,000 in your super funds, and you put 300 of that into your self-managed super fund, and you may use 200 for the property, you've got 100 left. You could do, obviously with advice, go buy shares. And obviously I know there are restrictions with different shares you can buy. And I'm not 100% sure on that. Obviously that's not my area, but you can buy, there are a lot of other assets you can buy with your super fund cash. But it's all, like I mentioned in the video to Chris, it's about taking control, but educated control. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure you're doing the right thing. And another thing that I think you and Chris did touch on as well a little bit, and someone's obviously been interested, if you can't build in a super fund, how do you buy a brand new property?
Okay, so a normal way to buy a brand new property is you buy the land and you pay the builder five or six progress payments from slab, frame, etc., up to completion. Now, a super fund can't do that because a super fund lender won't give you the money up until you basically have your occupation certificate, because you've got to be able to rent the property straight away. So what you can do though is you can go with what they call a single contract option. So that is where, okay, I'm going to buy this house, but I don't pay for it till it's finished. That's how it works. So you don't pay for the land and then progress payments. You basically just pay a 5%, 10%, 20, whatever percentage is for the property. And then you don't pay the rest of it until the house or whatever it is finished. You see this a little bit with, say, off-the-plan apartments, which I'm not a huge fan of, but that's an area where you could do a self-managed super fund, or a builder who's willing to build the house for you and give it to you on completion as well.
Right. No, that makes sense.
All right. Any other questions out there at the moment?
I think that's all we've got at the moment. Just check the question. Yeah, that's all we've got there at the moment.
Ah, cool. Easy as. So what I'll do now is I'm going to go through to the next part. I'm going to share my screen again, guys, on here. I've probably gone a bit, I've done questions. Perfect. Whoop, actually, I've done that. Sorry, guys, went a bit further than what I should have. All right, so we're up to our member portfolio breakdown. I actually really enjoy this, to be honest. This is the part where we talk about clients we've got and what they've been able to achieve whilst they've been with us. Last month, we had someone who was with us for 13 years. This one's just been someone who's been with us for 3 years. Now, obviously, when I do a member portfolio breakdown, the biggest thing I want to explain to you guys is I'm not here to say you're going to get rich quick. What I'm trying to say is this person was in this financial position when I met them, and this is the financial position they're in today. They may not be retired. They may not, be financially free. I'm not saying that that's what I'm going to do for you in 3 years. I'm not a get rich quick scheme person. But what I'm saying is they've made a huge difference in their lifestyle in just 3 short years. And I just want to share with you what they've done. And this one's a little bit, I wouldn't say complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. So bear with me with this one, guys. But I'm going to switch my screen over to the whiteboard again. All righty, guys. So what I've got here, I'm going to keep my trusty piece of paper. This one was a little bit complicated. So what we've got here, we've got Michael. And we've also got Alice. Obviously, they're not their real names, but these are our clients. So I actually first met these guys back in March 2021. So it wasn't that long ago. It's been just over 3 years' time. Now, when I met them, obviously, divorce hurts. Divorce is one of those things that can really affect you financially, gets messy, everyone loses. Sorry. Not every case, but a lot of cases, everyone loses, the solicitors win. So, but when I met these guys, what they had was they had a house over here. They actually owed $800,000 on it. So they had a substantial mortgage. They weren't even living in this property. Now, with Michael and Alice, they were actually living regionally because they worked regionally. So they were over here. Sorry for my crappy drawings. And they were paying rent. They were paying rent to live where they needed to work, but they still had their asset over here. Michael got divorced back in 2017. So this is 4 years after divorce. And what I see is after a divorce, it can take up to 5 years to get back on track, to be honest. Depends on how your divorce went, but it can take, I've seen it take about 5 years on average to get back on track. But what we're able to do is this was still classed as what they call their PPR. Now, PPR is principal place of residence. What's important about that is it stays capital gains tax free. I think it's 5 years off memory. So we want to make sure we're taking full advantage of this asset. But what we did was we had a certain plan of attack, and obviously it did change through it changed dramatically through the process. That's why regular reviews are quite important. But we went with the strategy of, now if you have been with me for a while, you'll know my strategy of capital growth property and a cash flow property side by side. So what we did was we went and released some equity here to fund deposits. And we came over here and we bought, sorry guys, we bought a house and land. and a dual key asset. Okay. So the whole plan was for these to work side by side, and this dual key cash flow property, because this would be positive cash flow, fund the shortfall on the growth property and set and forget. But it didn't go like that. It went better than that, to be honest, but that was our initial acquisition plan setup. Now, both these properties were bought with what we call unregistered land. So the land wasn't quite ready to build on. And the timing of these properties was quite simple. The whole plan was get this one built first. And by the time the land's ready to build on, this one will be finished. Sorry, I'll start again. When this one property is finished, then the land will be ready to build this one. So we had to build what we call a pipeline of purchases. That's what we call it. And it all went great because what happened was a couple of things happened. Obviously, we put this one in place. Let me just double check all my figures here. So this was here. This was April 2021. We put this in place, right? But then what happened was through the process, obviously an opportunity came up where they were regionally to buy a block of land. So these guys went out and bought another block of land here. So at this stage, they actually had 3 blocks of land contracted. And this land wasn't ready to build on yet either. Now, this is where it gets a little bit complicated, so keep with me. With this block of land, when they decided to buy this block of land, what they then decided to do was to sell off this PPR, because this is going to be their new PPR. So what they did was they sold this property off, which was awesome. They ended up getting good money because it was through COVID times. They got a little bit of uplift here to get this property out, to get the cash out of that property. And they ended up with about $700K out of that property as well, which was an awesome scenario because they were able to pump that $700K into this land or have it put aside, ready for the land for when it was getting built. Now, what happened from there is the next thing happened. Obviously, they took ownership on the land and all their plans were going through council. But this property here, which we wanted to keep long term, by the time the land got registered, by the time the construction happened, because they bought well, this is all about buying right, just so you know, it's all about buying well. This property had risen in value and they were able to sell this property and come out with another $220,000. So what we did there is on completion, the clients sold this asset off as well and added another $200,000 towards the build of their new PPR. Now, that is starting to get a little bit complicated. So let me just, I'll just bear with me a sec. I'm going to come back. So that's sort of, we would call stage 1 of what they did, right? So bear with me. Oh, that's a shocker. Hang on. What I'm trying to explain to you here is these guys really took my guidance in relation to property and they're able to do quite well for themselves. So let's draw out where they're at now. So they had land going through council. They still had their dual key asset over here, which they bought in March or April 21 anyway. Right. Now, whilst this was happening, whilst they were building this property here, what they did was they were obviously paying rent still, which is fine. If you're building, paying rent sometimes is the only option you've got. And at the end of the build, which happened, how are we going here? Because through that process, we actually, because the client put a cash deposit in here, when this property was finished, there was uplift. So we refinanced and got the deposit back out again to put another 100 or so grand into this property. On completion though, this property here, so we've moved right ahead now. So August 22 was when we sold the other property. April 23, we refinanced, got some cash out. August 2023, so we're looking at now, what's that? That's 8 months ago or so. August 2023, they moved into their new property. Now, they were able to do all that and have $880,000 mortgage. So they had 180 grand mortgage on their PPR and still had this dual key asset. And then what we did was, it got to a point where they had this dual key asset, there was a massive uplift because of a government announcement. Obviously, where they built this, there was a huge uplift. They'd had it about 12 months, I think, roughly. I think it was about 12 months, maybe 8 months. And what they did was they got a good offer on this property. So, and we're like, well, if you take that offer, you can pay out your mortgage. So they took that offer. So back in March 24, they sold this property off as well. And we were able to get another $200,000 profit out of this property. Okay. Now, of course, that $200,000 can pay out this home loan. We didn't do it straight away, though. Obviously, the profit was there. We didn't pay out the home loan straight away. We paid, obviously, 200 grand into the home loan. But then what they also did, they were smart. They've realized, okay, what we've done is we've recycled our property. We've recycled our equities. So what they did was, which is very smart, they went out straight away and we bought 2 more cash flow properties because they basically own their home at that point. So these ones were just cash flow because obviously we're not after as much growth now. We're after cash flow for income replacement, which you still need growth, don't get me wrong, but the next 2, we just went straight out and got high yield investment properties. Now from that, of course, what we did was we took that 200K profit and paid out the home loan itself. Now, as we speak, this client over here is signing their discharge form. Now, if you don't know what a discharge form is, that is releasing this loan from the bank. They will have no home loan at all, no personal debt whatsoever. So what's happened is from March 21 to basically, what are we now? We're May 24. This client was able to buy a couple of properties, sell a few properties, build a brand new, and this is I'm pretty sure it's like a huge 5-bedroom house where they are. It's a really nice house, and own it outright and refresh their portfolio and start again. Now, for me, that was a huge thing for me to get these guys to do that. Now, I'm not telling you they're retired, rich, or anything like that at this point, but they own their home outright, which a lot of people don't do. And they've got 2 high yield cash flow properties already in place to keep going. And these guys will keep buying more property. Even when I chatted to them yesterday, we've got big picture with what we're going to do with their property portfolio, guys. But this is just normal mum and dads putting this together. All right. So I hope that came out as good as what is in my head. I apologize if I lost you there through some point, but I just wanted to show you what we're able to do with these guys over 3 years' time. To put it all together. But it's about using what we call a pipeline of purchases. So depending on what risk profile you are, is what your pipeline of purchases would look like with us. All right. So I'm going to answer some questions on this one for you guys. If you have, okay, I'm back. All righty, Jess. So with these guys, with the real deal, or even if there's someone else with another super fun question that might have missed before,
Yeah.
do you have any questions on this client breakdown for you?
Yeah, we do have a couple. So, and I guess this is probably a couple of people's questions, is how did they buy so many properties at once?
Okay, so when you buy, the way we did these pipeline transactions is we set properties up so one was going to get finished before the next one. So they didn't necessarily have what you would say loan approval through that process. We were getting loans approved as they were getting closer. We knew we could get the loans approved, but obviously the way the banks are now, they're a little bit on the stricter side. You have pipeline of properties, and sometimes you're going to sell one before this other one gets completed or whatever it might be. That wasn't what we were doing with them initially, but once they bought their PPR block of land, we knew we had to make changes to that portfolio to make it all work. But because they bought right, we got good uplift to make good profit out of it. And honestly, the first one they didn't even really outlay anything, and they made good cash flow. Sorry, capital cash, not cash flow itself. And with the second one, they held for I think I can't exactly remember, sorry guys, but 8 to 12 months. And with that one, that was just an area that we knew was going to take off. We're just waiting for it. And a government announcement actually helped that. But it's like everything. You've got to be in it to win it. If you're waiting for the government announcement first before you buy your property, you've missed the market. Yeah. It's like when we look at a hotspot area. Sometimes we'll go into a hotspot area and it's too hot. So we'll move out to what we call a fringe area of that hotspot area. and we'll take advantage of what we call the ripple effect as it comes out. So
Yeah.
that's important when you're buying.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Sorry, Jess, any more questions on that one?
Yeah. So I guess it's all about the timing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, it's about timing.
Yeah, and buying,
I call
right.
it buying in a crossover effect, or as it's a pipeline of purchases, or acquisition plan. I also call it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously on the topic of the day, did these guys use any of their super to buy their properties?
No, they didn't. So with these guys, they had a bit of super there, but obviously they lost a bit of. Honestly, he lost a bit in divorce as well.
Yeah.
But they have enough super to buy property. But what they've done is they've chosen to diversify that and just leave that in their managed funds for now, while all this other property stuff was going on.
Yeah.
I'm confident they will use their super down the track.
Yeah.
But not everyone wants to use their super to buy property. It's just an option for people who do want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, awesome.
All right.
I think that's all we had. That was all we had on the real deal. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to share my screen, guys, again. I think we're almost done here. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I do like to reiterate this is everything we've done here is for that client, so that you may not get the same exact results. Your results could be better. They might not be quite as good because everyone's got different financial circumstances. For those guys that have been referred to this webinar, that may want to have a chat with us, we can look after everything for you. So what Jess has just whacked in there, what we call a 15-minute call. It's a link that you can book in. It's a 15-minute discovery call where we just jump on a call for a quick chat to see if we can help you, or even if you may have a quick question about you individually, you may not want to ask on this, which is also fine. Everyone's got their own privacy. But feel free to jump on a 15-minute call. It's in the chat there. We can book in and see how we go. So next month's workshop, as I said, is at the moment it's a Saturday, the 8th of June, but it is the King's birthday long weekend. So we could move that to a Tuesday night. We'll just see how we go with the timing of it next month, but that's next month. And then of course, that's it. Yeah, sorry. Sorry guys, that's it. Yeah, so guys, thanks again for watching. If you have any more questions, feel free to email us. Reach out on Facebook at The Property Bloke on Facebook. For those of you who do know us, you just give me a call as well. So that's no problems whatsoever. But really appreciate everyone's time today. And I hope you've all learned something. Fantastic. All right. Have a good one, guys. And have a great rest of the weekend. Have a good one.
Thank
See ya.
you.
Bye.